Mike Shildt of the Padres retired on Monday. Is Atlanta's managerial job really the best one out there? Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on into Braves Today for Tuesday, October 14th. Your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X, Braves_today. You can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. The NFL season's here. Because of that, they have a ton of great offers out there. So visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. I want to thank everybody for the well wishes that I got last week after having heart surgery on Friday. A little bit of complications. We got through it. I am still alive, thankfully. This is not a Weekend at Bernie's situation. And so we're going to get back to the regular cadence of the show. In just a few minutes, I want to talk about the catcher position, right? We're going to break down every position as we head into free agency, right? What it looked like in 25, what it's going to look like in 26. We're going to start with the catcher position. But before we do that, I want to talk about the managerial openings, because this has been absurd this year. There were 9 jobs open, and there theoretically could be another, if the team in the playoffs decides they need to can somebody. But the Rangers hired Skip Schumacher. A couple people were mad that the Braves weren't reported to have called the Rangers about Skip. They hired Skip the day before Atlanta started the search, but everybody knew this was coming. Again, I mentioned this on a show like last week. He was already working for the front office. His Miami bench coach was already working in the dugout. Like, he was already the bench coach for the Rangers. They had put him on Bochy's staff going into last year. So your openings now, Braves, Giants, Angels, Orioles, Twins, Rockies, Nationals, and San Diego Padres. Mike Shildt retired. He's 57 years old. He said that he just didn't have it in him to do another 162 game schedule. And I get it. It's a grind. Baseball is a tough sport from the perspective of how long the season takes from when you first report in February all the way through when you're done at the end of September or October, depending on how you do. I get it. I absolutely get it. It's a 9-month job. It's tough. I understand. And so let's look at these openings. Pros and cons of the Braves job in the first segment. Then we'll look at some of the more prestigious of these other openings. And let's figure out, is Atlanta's really the most desirable? So pros and cons for the Braves. I think the biggest thing that Atlanta has going for them, something that they can hold over just about every other team in the managerial market this year, is Atlanta has virtually unprecedented roster stability, right? You look at the Braves situation right now, you have, in essence, 2 true free agents, and Marcell Ozuna and Raisel Iglesias, your DH and your closer. And you can't minimize the fact you're losing offense historically. With Marcell Ozuna, you're losing a pretty good closer, except for the first half of the season, and Raisel Iglesias. But all 3 of your outfielders locked in. 3 of your 4 infield spots locked in. You've got a catcher. You've got another catcher. You have unprecedented depth. Again, we're going to get to that in the third segment. You've got a really good rotation. They'll pick up Chris Sale's option. You'll have Chris Sale, Spencer Schwellenbach, Spencer Strider, Hurston Waldrop, a bunch of really good pitchers. You don't have a lot of work to do on this lineup to fill out a lineup card on opening day. Now, they need to improve at a couple spots. We've talked about that. And my hope is that last offseason that taught Alex Anthopoulos that this needs to be a quality over quantity thing. Don't go sign 13 relievers to minor league deals. Sign 2 proven guys to major league deals, right? But the point is, unprecedented roster stability, and nobody else on this list can really say that in every single respect. Again, lineup, bullpen, rotation, all of that. Atlanta's almost entirely filled out already, which is fantastic. The corresponding con to that is a lot of those guys underperformed last year, right? You look at a Braves offense, some of these guys were hurt. Sean Murphy was hurt twice. Austin Riley was technically hurt twice, but really it was just the same injury. Ozzie Albies had another season end with a bone break and a wrist hand kind of thing. Ronald Acuna Jr. missed time twice. And so, and even when the guys were there, they weren't the same versions of themselves we're used to. Austin Riley hit .260 with a .428 slug. 16 home runs in 102 games. Matt Olson only had 29 home runs, and he led the team. Marcell Ozuna really struggled. Michael Harris got to a 2020 season, rebounded to a .250 average, but it was very bad for him for a long time this year. So yes, you have a roster that's kind of locked in here, but you need to get them to perform better than they have the last 2 seasons. Figuring out what happened and why they haven't been better is paramount. You've got to do that, right? So definitely one of the things it's a pro that these guys are here. You know who your guys are going to be. A con, and I'd even argue it's not that big of a con compared to some other teams, but you've got to get them back to the best versions of themselves, okay? Another pro for Atlanta is the front office stability. Alex Anthopoulos has, if I read this right, the longest GM contract in all of baseball. He signed into the 2030s. And so, despite the 1 year with a losing record and what some fans want to happen, he's not in any danger of losing his job. Right? He has a system. It normally has worked. Again, he struggled last offseason. I still maintain that he had the payroll rug pulled out from underneath him. But the Braves have a lot of stability in their player development group. They did just get rid of the minor league pitching development guy, but a lot of stability in their front office, right? Player development, scouting, the draft with Renette Shaw and his team. So you feel good about that. The con is you have a lot of the same coaches. You changed the hitting coach last offseason. You brought in a different third base coach mid-year. But a lot of your coaches are the same coaches, right? Rick Kranitz has been here forever. Eddie Perez has been here for a long time. And so, depending on who gets the job, if it's somebody like a Walt Weiss, it's going to be difficult, especially for an internal guy, to clean house and bring in his guys. And even if you do a new manager from outside, I guarantee you one of the considerations in this whole process is going to be hey, you want to keep Rick Kranitz? He's been really good. The pitching has been really good when they've been healthy. You should keep Rick Kranitz. There's going to be a question about, do you change hitting coaches again? Do you go for a third offensive philosophy in 3 seasons? Do you do wholesale changes here with changing your bench coach partway through? Do you get rid of Eddie Perez? There's a lot of guys who have been here for a long time. And so it's going to be in a chemistry-driven clubhouse and front office. It's going to be disruptive if you've let too many of those guys go. And there will be an adjustment period. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm saying there will be an adjustment period in that situation, just like we saw the adjustment period required for Tim Hires. I think the third thing Atlanta has going for them, and some of these organizations, the Giants specifically, also have this to an extent, but not like Atlanta, is the organizational history. The Atlanta Braves are one of, this sounds sarcastic, one of the greatest franchises in baseball history, right? From a longevity standpoint, they're the longest continuously operating franchise. They've won multiple World Series. They've won a World Series this decade, which none of these other teams that are hiring for a manager can say. And so, I guess the Rangers could have, but they've already made their hire. And so, there is a certain bit of cachet, I guess, that comes with being the manager of the Braves. They've had 3 managers this century. 3 managers this century. That's the kind of organizational history that you're walking into. Like, believe it or not, it means something to be an Atlanta Brave. Guys talk about this. We've heard it from so many people. The flip side of this, there is a con here. I have a con for every pro, guys. Don't worry. The con here is you could argue that the Braves way needs to be updated just a little bit. Don't get me wrong. Most of this is great, right? The focus on the clubhouse and chemistry. But we've seen situations where guys really should take a day off and they don't, right? Because they want to play every day. And the organizations always let them do that. And to the point where guys will stay quiet about injuries to stay in the lineup. Something that in a vacuum would easily be argued needs to be changed. So nothing's fundamentally wrong with the Atlanta Braves, but there are things about the way the Atlanta Braves have always done things that you could argue need to be updated. Even when it gets to like free agency and stuff, right? There's an argument there that Atlanta's insistence on never going over $22 million a year, never giving a no trade or a player option or a vesting option or deferred money. You could argue that in certain situations that hurts the Braves and their ability to sign players. And I think the biggest test we'll have of that is what happens with Ha-Seong Kim this offseason. Because Scott Boras, his agent, is infamous for wanting all of those things. He wants player opt-outs. He wants player options. He wants no trade clauses. He wants assignment bonuses. He wants like all of those things Atlanta doesn't do. And so do they budge a little to make the deal and keep Ha-Seong Kim? Or do they let him walk because they don't want to do some of that stuff, right? So pros and cons there. But in just a minute, let's talk about a couple of, let's rule out most of these teams off this list. And then let's talk about, I think, 2 that are in the running with Atlanta for best job available this cycle. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Delete Me. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough that everyone is vulnerable. Because data brokers don't really contribute to society. They just hoover up all your info whenever it's leaked online, all that kind of stuff. A lot of times it's illegally gotten, yes. And then it's a commodity. They sell it, they make a profit off of it. Anybody on the internet can buy it, usually or potentially for illicit purposes, right? Phishing attempts, identity theft, harassment, whatever. But you can protect your privacy with Delete Me. So take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me now at a special discount for Braves Today listeners. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/HIT and use promo code HIT at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/HIT, enter promo code HIT at checkout. Because we do things in threes, that's joindeleteme.com/HIT with promo code HIT. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby. Let's talk about some of these other openings, because we discussed the Braves opening, okay? Pros and cons. As of now, I'm still of the opinion that that is the best opening. But let's look at some of the rest. And quickly, we can rule a lot of these out as not being on the same level. The Angels job? Nope. Out. The Twins job? I would argue, no. We saw how their payroll has fallen the last couple seasons. They just sold a bunch of pieces at the deadline. They are heading into a rebuild. No. The Rockies can't even hire anybody yet because they don't have a president of baseball operations, which honestly, they called me. I would do it. I would move to Denver, Colorado to see if I could fix the Colorado Rockies. Call me. Listen, Dick Monfort, give me a call, man. The Washington Nationals, they just hired Paul Taboni to run baseball operations, but where they are in their competitive window, they are also not at the Braves level. So that leaves the Orioles, the Padres, and the Giants. And I'm going to go on a limb and rule out the Orioles right now. Simply because, yes, they have a lot of young, impressive position players, right? Gunnar Henderson's a very good shortstop, right? Jackson Holliday at second base. He can also play short. Adley Rutschman, who weirdly fell off the face of the earth this year, but Adley Rutschman. A lot of young players, prospects coming up. But the pitching is so incredibly suspect. They've had so many guys get injured. They've had so many guys not pan out. All of these issues that I think right now, your rotation is like Trevor Rogers, Kyle Bradish, Dean Kramer, Tyler Wells, Cade Povich. Grayson Rodriguez should be back at some point in time. That's not intimidating. I'm not worried about facing that lineup at all. And so, I'm going to go ahead and rule the Orioles out as well. And they don't spend money to fix or replace any of these guys. They don't like to spend money. Even with a new owner, who's a billionaire, they don't spend money. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, they're probably out. Okay. Giants and Padres. Let's take Padres first, because that job opened up just recently. The pro here for the Padres, when you're looking at this, and it's a similar argument that Atlanta has, is the Padres have a core that is locked in, right? You look at the payroll. They have a bunch of guys that are signed for a bunch of years. You got Manny Machado. You got Xander Bogaerts. You got Fernando Tatis. Jake Cronenworth's there. I think it was a 7-year deal, so through 2030. Even some of they'll bring back Ramon Laureano. It's a club option. A lot of the young guys. Jackson Merrill got an extension. He signed through 2034 with a 35 club option. But even guys that are in arbitration, they've got Gavin Sheets for 2 more seasons. Catcher Luis Campusano for 3 more seasons. That bullpen, Jason Adams there for at least 1 more year. Mason Miller's there for 4 more seasons, right? A lot of things to like. The flip side of this is that core is both aging and pricey, okay? Manny Machado is 33 years old, and he's making an average of $31 million a year through 2033. He's going to play till he's almost 40. Xander Bogaerts is signed through 2033 at $25 million a year. Fernando Tatis is signed through 2034. He's thankfully just about 27 years old. That's fine. But Yu Darvish signed through 2028, but he's already 39 years old. You're paying him through age 42. So, yes, they have even Jake Cronenworth is almost 32, and he's signed for 5 more seasons. You're paying a lot of these guys into their late 30s. And again, a lot of them are making a bunch of money. Again, Machado's AAV is $31.8 million. Bogaerts is $25.5. Tatis is $24.5. Atlanta, by contrast, yes, they have a lot of guys signed long-term. Matt Olson signed through 2029. He's 31 years old. Even if they pick up the club option, they're done with him by the age of 35. Austin Riley's the one that is going to age more, right? He's signed through 2032 when he's already 28 years old. But again, you're not going to be in the back half of the 30s. He'll be done at age 35, depending on the club option, right? And so a lot of Atlanta's guys, Spencer Strider signed through 2028 with a club option, but he's 27 years old. Ronald Acuna Jr. is signed with options through 2028. He's 27, 28 years old. You're not paying these guys into their late 30s. So I'd argue Atlanta has a core that is just as good, if not better, than San Diego's. Maybe all of Atlanta's stars aren't as good as all of San Diego stars, but Atlanta's core is deeper, I'd argue. And they're younger, and they're paid less. So there you go. Pros for the Padres, wonderful ballpark. If you've never been to San Diego, it's a gorgeous ballpark. The weather is fantastic. Believe it or not, these things matter, right? Like, these things do matter to these guys. It is easier to play in San Diego than it is to play in Atlanta, because in the summer, Atlanta is 95 and humid, and San Diego on a bad day is 85, right? The flip side of this is taxes in the state of California are significant, especially if you're an athlete. And you also have the question of how much will ownership actually spend, because of the fact when Peter Seidler passed and his family took control of the team, they've not been spending the same amount of money that they did when he was here. So, yeah, the ballpark's wonderful. It is aging a little bit, but do they have the financial wherewithal to make up for where the ballpark is in the state of California? I would argue they have not shown the willingness to pay extra to make up for that. So there you go. Padres playoff team in 2026. We have to acknowledge, of all of these teams, they had the best record and they went to the postseason. Now they lost. And what's really tough here is they are losing a lot of starting pitching, right? Some of these, like, they have Joe Musgrove coming back. They have Yu Darvish coming back, right? But if you look at who is not going to be here, Michael King, Dylan Cease, Nestor Cortez is also a free agent. That's 3 guys right there, 3 starters that are walking out the door. And I say Michael King's not going to be back. He has a mutual option for $15 million. I'm sure somebody in the comments will have it. I genuinely can't remember the last time a mutual option was picked up. I want to say it was the Rockies, like in 2013, maybe. It was a reliever, Matt Belize, I think. It was like $4.5 million, and the buyout was almost nothing. But for some reason, like, he was fine with it. They were fine with it. Normally, what happens is either the player wants more money, or the team wants to pay them less. Michael King's mutual option is $15 million. Either he thinks he can beat that in the open market, or they don't want to pay him 15. That's almost what always happens. So yes, they'll have Joe Musgrove. Yes, they'll have Yu Darvish. But, like, they're losing Michael King and Dylan Cease and Nestor Cortez. They're losing guys that are important for this team. And it's important to remember that, like, Joe Musgrove had Tommy John surgery in October 2024. He actually hurt his arm pitching against the Braves in the wild card. Like, it was in the Braves game where he blew his elbow out. So he'll be back probably early next year. But, like, is he going to be a number 1 for you? Like, what's your rotation going to look like at that point? And so you'll have Joe Musgrove eventually. You'll have Darvish. You'll have Pivetta. But you're losing a lot of your starting pitching, your quality starting pitching, including arguably your 2 best guys in Dylan Cease and Michael King when they're healthy. And then also Nestor Cortez, who can absolutely take starts for you, even if he's not a great kind of option there. So move over to the Giants. Pro here, they have legitimate superstars on this team. They traded for Rafi Devers and all of his contract, right? Willie Adames, Matt Chapman, Robbie Ray. Like, they have legitimate stars on this team that all have multiple years of control. The downside of this, it's a very top-heavy roster. If they don't pick up the $4 million club option for Tom Murphy, they will have exactly 6 guys, as of right now, on guaranteed money next year. Everybody else is pre-arbitration or arbitration. Everybody else. They'll have Logan Webb, Robbie Ray in the rotation on guaranteed contracts, right? Center fielder Young-Hoo Lee, Matt Chapman, Willie Adames, and Devers. That's it. Everybody else is on pre-arbitration or arbitration. It's a very top-heavy roster. And that means an injury to one of those guys is significantly more impactful than Atlanta's eventual, we're going to lose an infielder or we're going to lose an outfielder thing that always happens, right? Because Atlanta has so many more guys up there while the Giants do not. Pro here is there's a fresh face in the front office. Buster Posey is now president of baseball operations for the Giants. Obviously, organizational great, was a catcher for them. Also, fun fact, and I talked about this in the Sean Murphy hip injury show that we did. He had the same hip surgery that Sean Murphy had. Posey played one more season and then retired after having that surgery. I think one or maybe two, one of those. He didn't specifically mention that injury when he retired, but he did talk about the accumulated wear and tear on his body and the stress and the pain and all of that. But while he's a fresh voice in the front office, he's also inexperienced. He spent some time in the ownership group. He has a minority stake in the team, or he did. I don't know if he has to sell that or not to be the GM, but never been a full-time front office employee, never mind the man. So there's a little bit of a lack of knowledge there about how much is he going to dictate things to the dugout and the manager, lineups, pitching plans, all that kind of stuff. We talked about this early last week with the Alex Anthopoulos press conference. I played the clip. He defers to the manager on a lot of this stuff. So if you're thinking about Alex Anthopoulos has been executive of the year, he's won a World Series as a GM, a ton of team control and a ton of experience. And I know he's going to give me the freedom to do what I want to do as the manager versus Buster Posey could possibly not know what he's doing or has not dealt with a lot of this stuff before because he's still pretty inexperienced and has never really had to build a roster himself other than what he did to tweak it this year. And also, I don't know how he's going to relay things from the front office to the dugout. I think I'm picking Atlanta over picking the Giants. Another factor here, and it's not the factor, but I do think it needs to be mentioned because managers care about this stuff, and I'm not arguing that this matters as nearly as much as some of the other things. But a thing that Atlanta has in their favor that the Padres and Giants do not is the Braves are a pretty good defense. The Braves' infield defense was pretty good this year. The outfield defense struggled at times, Profar and Acuna in the corners and all of that. But on the whole, the Braves are fundamentally a good defensive team. Matt Olson's going to win the Gold Glove. Sean Murphy's a former Gold Glove winner. Nick Allen is capable of Gold Glove caliber defense. The problem is he hits like he's hitting with a glove. But they're fundamentally sound defensively. The Giants, if you look at fielding run value on StatCast, they come in better than Atlanta. They come in top 10 at plus 16, but the reason for that is entirely Patrick Bailey. Catcher Patrick Bailey, who kind of has a bat like Nick Allen's, is plus 31 in run value behind the plate. The combination of all of the position players outside of him are minus 16. And when you dig into the actual players on these teams, Willy Adames, Matt Chapman are both positive defenders. They were both worth plus 4 fielding run value at short and third base, respectively there. And then everybody else was negative, including Heliot Ramos at negative 11 as one of the worst defensive left fielders in all of baseball. The Padres aren't as bad as the Giants, right? Fernando Tatis, plus 9. Jackson Merrill, plus 5. Huge shout out to Xander Bogaerts for rebounding on defense, plus 7. He was so bad that they moved him to second base in favor of Ha-Seong Kim playing short. But outside of that, a lot of the down roster players, Manny Machado, negative 4 fielding run value at third base. He used to be the best defensive third baseman in baseball. Like him and Nolan Arenado were just back and forth, AL, NL, going for getting their respective Gold Gloves every year when he was in Baltimore and things like that. And Manny Machado is now -4 fielding run value at third base. And good thing he's not signed for another 8 years, right? Casey Schmidt played a lot of first and second and third and some short for the Giants, -2. Young-Hoo Lee, 1,200 plus innings in center field, -2. Tyler Fitzgerald played a bunch of second base, 0 for the Giants. Gavin Sheets, mostly left field, -1. Jake Cronenworth played a bunch of second, a little bit of first and short, -1. Like, most of these rosters are full of bad defenders. For the Braves, you at least have some pretty decent defenders all over the field. And again, you do have Ronald and Jerks and Profar were both negative. But like outside of that, Sean Murphy, Michael Harris, Matt Olson, Nick Allen was fantastic again. Even Eli White was like +4 in the outfield. Like, even he was pretty good. Nacho Alvarez was +1 at third base. Like, you have some pretty decent defenders on the roster. Even if you have to go to backups, like a White or an Alvarez, you still have decent defense. These other two teams don't have that. And I think for some of these experienced and tenured managers who are on the market, maybe a Rocco Baldelli, right? Maybe a Dave Martinez, a Bruce Bochy. I don't know if these guys are going to get back in the game or not. David Ross, whatever. Things like that can be the differentiator. So if it's me, I'm saying yes, the Braves are still the #1 most desirable job this winter. I'm probably going Braves, Giants, Padres, simply because I think the Giants have a better ability to spend money than the Padres do, with the Orioles being 4th unless they're willing to open the purse strings. And we haven't seen it yet, so it's hard to know that they will. In just a minute, let's talk about the catchers from this season, because we're expecting Drake Baldwin to win Rookie of the Year, but the outlook for 2026 is pretty good with one glaring caveat. We'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Ton of great offers out there for the NFL season. As I record this, I'm watching the Falcons wrap up Monday Night Football against the Bills. They've looked pretty good, at least they did in the first half and early in the second half. But I've been watching the MLB odds for the postseason. We're down to 4 teams. And as of Monday night, Dodgers +100, Mariners +150. It's your most likely World Series champions. Brewers at +600 because they still have a chance of knocking off the Dodgers. Blue Jays at +1,000 because they're in a 2-0 hole after 2 home games. And shout out to the Mariners, because the Mariners played 15 innings over the weekend, flew to Toronto, and then won the first 2 games. That's impressive. So Dodgers Mariners, by the odds, is the most likely World Series matchup. They're back in Seattle on Wednesday. Shane Bieber versus George Kirby. Mariners are favored by a 1.5. If you're ready to give this a shot, visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby. Let's talk about the catchers this season, okay? Because when you look at Atlanta's, a lot of things went wrong for the Braves this year. And I think one of the biggest things that went wrong, they used an MLB high 71 players. According to Braves comms, the comms team, when they sent out the end of season stats and notes for all of us, that's an MLB record. They only used 4 catchers, and 2 of those 4 catchers combined for 6 total games. So your stats here, in 92 games at catcher, Drake Baldwin hit .272 with a .342 on base and a .475 slug. Sean Murphy in 72 games hit .203 with a .313 on base and a .414 slug. 17 homers for Baldwin, 14 for Murphy. The big difference here was an RBI, 63 for Baldwin, 38 for Murphy. A lot of Murphy's homers felt like they were solo shots early in the year, and he hit like 7 of his homers in that first month he was back. But point is, Almost everything came from them. Sandy Leone and Chadwick Tromp combined for 17 at-bats. Leone went 1 for 12 with a homer. Tromp went 0 for 5. That's it. Outside of 17 at-bats, those two guys took everything else. Baldwin and Murphy. And you could see, there's things that they did well, and there's things that they struggled with. Braves catchers collectively, and you have to count everybody because Leone had one here. Braves catchers collectively had 32 home runs. It was tied for second most in baseball with the Athletics. And that was almost entirely Shea Langoliers. People don't quite realize, if you compare Shea Langoliers' numbers to some of the early career JT Realmuto numbers, there's some real similarities there. I think Realmuto is much better with the hit tool, but Langoliers is a pretty good catcher, and a lot of people just kind of forget that. Former Brave. Atlanta can apparently develop and then trade catchers. The Mariners obviously led with this. They had 53 from their catchers. Cal Raleigh, yes, he hit more. He hit some from the DH spot. He had 49 homers as a catcher, 11 as a DH, and then 4 other catcher homers came from Mitch Garver. So 53 from the catcher spot. So they did that well. Drake Baldwin, runners in scoring position, 319. One of the best hitters in baseball. Sean Murphy caught stealing. And I looked at this not in the accumulation stat, caught stealing, but in the rate stat, caught stealing above average. +4. It was top 8 in all baseball. Both of them in blocks above average were top 6. Sean Murphy was at +8. Drake Baldwin was at +7. The rate stat was Murphy at 6 and Baldwin at 11. And I will say here, Drake Baldwin really struggled early, and he got significantly better at this down the stretch. He really improved his blocking ability. I wrote a little bit about it late in the year, maybe late August, over on Braves Today. But credit to Drake Baldwin, credit to Sandy Leone, who worked a lot with Drake Baldwin last year in Gwinnett, this year in spring, and even when he got back on the roster this fall. Atlanta re-signed him to a minor league deal per his MLB.com page. But when he's done, I'm not opposed to him being in the organization as a coach. I thought he did a great job helping Baldwin. What they struggled with, though, a lot of Drake Baldwin's defensive metrics outside of the blocks above average were below average. His caught stealing above average was -2, 19th percentile. His framing, -1 run value, 45th percentile. Sean Murphy's offense was obviously a problem. And this, to me, is the really kind of big thing. We'll get to it in a second, but it's the really big question mark you have for 26. But when you look at these two guys, you can see a clear delineation between what they do. Baldwin was the better hitter. His batting average was well and above Murphy's, 69 points better. Just kind of like a really nice gap there between those guys. Murphy was the better defender. I don't know how much I believe in catcher ERA, which is the ERA depending on who you throw to. But Sean Murphy's catcher ERA was 4.12, and the opponent OPS was 98. Drake Baldwin's catcher ERA was 4.58, so 46 points worse, half a run, so 40 points, half a run worse, 4.46, half a run worse when they threw to Baldwin than when they threw to Murphy. Opponent OPS was 103, OPS plus was 103. The caveat here on catcher ERA is Baldwin caught almost everything in the final month when Atlanta had guys like Carlos Carrasco and all that rolling out there, just trying to, Eric Fetty, just trying to eat up starts to get through the end of the season. That's the caveat, and that's why I don't know how much I trust catcher ERA. I think it can give you an idea. And we've talked before, Jake and I talked a lot on the postcast about this, about the differences in the game calling for Baldwin and Murphy, about how it almost felt like Baldwin was obsessively trying to use every pitch of a guy. Maybe a little bit of a detriment, hey, rather than throwing this guy's 4th best pitch because the batter hasn't seen it yet in the at-bat, maybe go back to his best pitch to get the punchy. Whereas Murphy would just spam that same pitch over and over and over again until they figured out how to hit it. He's like, oh, they can't hit the slider. That's fine. I'll call 15 sliders in the next 19 pitches until they figure out how to hit the dang thing. You probably need to be somewhere in the middle on that. But like that's the difference in styles that you kind of notice after a while with these different catchers and the way that they call games. And again, the big question here is going to be, when is Murphy back to fully healthy from the hip surgery that he had for the torn hip labrum? If we assume he's back for opening day, which the Braves timeline said that was absolutely realistic. I talked to a sports medicine expert. We did that show. There's a newsletter on it too, where the timeline that he gave that he typically sees in this, and he at one point in time was the team doctor or the team surgeon for the Chicago White Sox. So like he's dealt with this exact injury, but not Murphy's. Suggested that it could be a little bit into the season before Murphy's ready to go. But assuming Murphy's back without restrictions by opening day, it feels like your plan here is going to be Murphy like 4 days a week, Baldwin 3 behind the plate. Murphy maybe gets like one game at DH, but like Drake Baldwin, if he's not behind the plate, he's probably your primary DH option. Maybe he gets 3 DH starts a week. So he's in the lineup 6 days a week, but he's not behind the plate for all of those. Sean Murphy's 4 games behind the plate. Maybe he DHs once. And your final 2 or 3 DH spots, it's like you rotate Jurickson Profar in, you rotate Ronald Acuna Jr. in, and that's just going off the roster you have now, right? You throw Eli White in right or left field or whatever. You give those veterans a half day. If Atlanta signs somebody, either a starting caliber outfielder or, a second base, outfield, utility, whatever kind of guy that needs to be in the lineup more often, maybe that's a situation, or trades for him. We talked about Brendan Donovan. Maybe that's a situation where you don't DH Murphy at all. And Baldwin ends up, maybe he gets 4 starts to Murphy's 3 because Baldwin's maybe only DHing once. So you want to get his bat in the lineup 5 days a week. And Murphy's in there 3 days to 4 days, right? We just don't really know. But the overall investment in the catching position, $16 million, which is not bad at all. Now, Sean Murphy's getting $15 million of that. But it's not a big deal. The third catcher, we don't know as of now who the third catcher is. Chucky Robinson was a former Dodger. They claimed off the waivers late in the year, optioned him to Gwinnett. He's on the 40-man roster still. Sandy Leon, like I said earlier, was re-signed to a minor league deal. I don't know how much this matters. Murphy missed 9 games to start the year. Baldwin started 7 of those. Shalwick Trump got 2. When Sean Murphy was done on September 6th, Drake Baldwin got 16 of the next 19 starts. Sandy Leon got 3. So, if it's a shorter-term injury, like a month or something, I don't think it matters who the third catcher is. They'll just run that first guy pretty hard. Now, if Drake Baldwin or Sean Murphy's out for half the season, you have to be a little more mindful of workload. You probably try to get a veteran catcher versus having Leon or Chucky Robinson make multiple starts in a week. But if you have a guy who's out for 3 weeks or a month, and we've seen this before, Travis d'Arnaud missed a month in 2023, early in the year, and Sean Murphy started all but one of those games while d'Arnaud was out. And Sean Murphy hit 300 in that stretch and was awesome because his hip was still feeling good and he had everyday playing time. So, all in all, I think pitcher is probably, of all the position player groups, I think catcher is probably the least concerning and the deepest for 2025. Zero concern here, provided that everybody's back to being healthy, in which we've learned with this Braves team in the last few seasons, that is never a guarantee. That'll do it for Braves Today for Tuesday, October 14th. Do me a favor, you're listening on audio, give us a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment down below, even if it's just the word comment. That helps the algorithm, helps it share out to other people so we can grow Braves Today. But also, consider turning on the notification bell so you know when I drop a new episode. We drop shorts when news happen. And I'm trying to bring back the Friday Lives. If I can get the dog to cooperate, we're going to bring back the Friday Live shows. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.